They didn't even say it in person. Just an email marked confidential HR notification. Subject line, Care Optimization Initiative, Nursing Structure Update. I read it in the break room between patient rounds. My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need it to be. I'd seen the signs. They stopped asking me to train new hires. Then they cut my access to the med scheduling system. Last week, I was reassigned to a wing that had half the patient load and none of the acuity. When I asked why, my manager said, "We're just trying to lighten your workflow, Meredith. Let the system carry more of the burden." The system. That's what they called it now. The VitalBridge AI Nurse Companion Suite. It tracked vitals, flagged symptoms, automated intake questions, even predicted discharges. The hospital had signed a 5-year contract and made the rounds on local news, bringing 21st century efficiency to bedside care. They rolled it out with a demo video and cupcakes. My name is Meredith Chase. I've been a nurse for 32 years, 12 of them on the same floor. I've seen 5 administrations, 4 EMR overhauls, 3 CEOs, and more policy changes than I can count. I've held the hands of dying patients, stopped a silent bleed before the labs caught it, talked down a psych case with nothing but my voice. And apparently, none of that is scalable. I didn't make a scene. I just finished my shift, clocked out, and drove home in silence. No radio, just the kind of quiet that stretches too long. When I got there, I found a plant on my porch. A peace lily. No note, no sender, but I knew who it was from. Mrs. Lynn. She was discharged 2 weeks ago after a fall. 86. Nonverbal, soft hands. The I had flagged her vitals as stable, cleared her for home. But something was off. Her eyes twitched in a way that didn't match her pain scale report. I ran a second scan, off protocol. She had a slow subdural bleed, caught it just in time. No system would have seen it, but I did. I took the plant inside, watered it, then sat down and opened the file I'd been building for months. Notes, screenshots, algorithm inconsistencies. Stories. Real ones. From nurses who caught what the system missed. From patients whose dignity came not from efficiency, but from being seen. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew this. If they wanted a system to replace me, then I was going to show them what it meant when the system failed, and a nurse was no longer there to catch it. By the end of the month, the VitalBridge system missed 3 critical signs in my old unit. The first was Mr. Coen, post-op knee replacement. The system flagged his vitals as within tolerance, but never noticed the cool skin on his left foot, or the slight bluish tint creeping up from his toes. It called it non-urgent. I called the charge nurse. It was a clot. Could have cost him his leg, maybe more. They saved him, barely. No one mentioned the system error in the chart. The second was a young woman in psych, flagged as, quote, low risk. She smiled at the intake camera, answered every question calmly, but her records didn't mention that she'd overdosed 3 times in the past year and masked like a pro. The system said she was stable. She tried to hang herself with a blood pressure cuff on day 2. And the third? That one didn't make it. They blamed it on staff fatigue. A failure to follow up on flagged suggestions, they said. I wanted to scream, because I knew the signs had never been flagged at all. Meanwhile, admin doubled down. We got pamphlets about the quote transitional efficiency model, telling us to let go of legacy instincts and trust the learning curve. The new CNO stood in front of a room of nurses and said, You are now care facilitators, not diagnostics." Someone clapped. I didn't. Instead, I started collecting stories, not official ones. The quiet kind. Stories told between rounds. Ones no one charted because they'd been trained not to question the system. I built a spreadsheet, called it Shadow Notes. It had 5 columns: patient ID, system assessment, nurse concern, outcome, admin response. I kept it off network. Printed backup copies. Shared it with 2 other nurses I trusted: Alice, who'd worked oncology for a decade, and Malik, a trauma nurse with eyes sharper than any scanner. They added their notes in pen. It grew fast, and so did the failures. Malik told me, "We're not nurses anymore. We're button pushers with stethoscopes." Alice said, "I feel like I'm watching people drown through a touchscreen." We didn't say it out loud, but we all felt it. The system was training the empathy out of us, replacing judgment with prompts, care with compliance. That's when I got the email from Dr. Laura Bennett. She'd retired last year after 40 years in emergency medicine, not because she wanted to, but because she refused to, quote, pre-authorize patient trauma coding through an AI module. The subject line was just, "Still awake, Meredith?" The message said, "I've been watching what's happening. I've got time. And ideas. You in?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed 2 words. "Let's begin." Doctor. Laura Bennett didn't waste time. Within a week of our first call, she sent me a spreadsheet. Not a manifesto, not a rant. Just cold, quiet data, 172 cases across 6 hospitals, all post-AI implementation, where nursing instinct caught what the system missed. No names, just patterns. In 86% of cases, human intervention prevented deterioration. In 14%, the patient died. In 0% did the system issue a correction. She titled the file Proof of Care. I added my shadow notes as an appendix. Alice and Malik contributed too. By the end of the week, the document was nearly 100 pages long. Quiet documentation of what they called legacy intuition, and we called experience. Meanwhile, things at the hospital were slick. Admin rolled out branded tablets for every nurse. Care companions, they called them. They chirped reminders. They flashed recommendations. They called you by name. They didn't feel like help. They felt like surveillance. Malik turned his face away every time he logged in. "Feels like it's watching me breathe," he muttered. Then came the in-service training day, mandatory. A full day off the floor to attend a seminar hosted by VitalBridge's Director of Clinical Development, a former marketing exec named Dana Ward, who kept calling us care stakeholders. She showed slides about, quote, data-enriched empathy and prompt-based compassion delivery. I asked a question. If the system fails to flag a critical lab value, but a nurse catches it, is that data recorded? Dana blinked. It would depend on your compliance with the decision tracking tool. What if it's not documented? Then clinically it didn't happen. That's when I knew. They weren't just erasing nurses from decision-making. They were erasing our memory. 2 nights later, Alice and I started phase 1. We didn't sabotage anything. We didn't whistleblow. We just did something much simpler. We charted the truth. Every time the system missed something, we logged it. On the record, in patient files, flagged with discrepancy with AI suggestion. We copied physicians. We noted outcomes. We watched how many times VitalBridge tried to override what we already knew. Within a week, 7 flags had been filed. Internal Risk Review opened a, quote, process audit. They didn't know who was behind it yet, but they were looking. Laura sent us encrypted storage space on a private academic server. She started organizing our cases for publication. This isn't just pushback, she told me. This is research. Meanwhile, patients started to notice. One of them, a boy with asthma, looked at me as I adjusted his dosage. The screen said I was fine, he whispered. I smiled. You're not a screen. They called me into a performance alignment review. No warning. Just a calendar invite with 2 names I didn't recognize and one I did. Jenna, our nursing supervisor, who used to hand me chocolate bars on double shifts. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The meeting was in the new admin wing. Bright lights. Noise-canceling walls. The kind of room where conversations go to disappear. Meredith, said the man on the left. Ryan something. VitalBridge's regional integration officer. We've noticed irregularities in your use of the system. Irregularities, I said. Or contradictions. He smiled like a man who's been coached to. We're focused on alignment. You've created multiple manual overrides that disrupt the system's optimization curve. That's because the system was wrong. Jenna shifted in her seat. Ryan tapped his screen. The patient in room 413, for example. You administered fluids 2 hours before the system recommended it, because her lips were dry and her speech was slurring. She was crashing, and yet her vitals were within tolerance, and yet she walked out of this hospital alive. Silence. The other woman, HR, maybe, cleared her throat. Meredith, we value your years of service, but we're transitioning to a model where consistency is key. If you're unable to operate within that framework, let me guess, voluntary reassignment, early retirement, quiet exit. They said nothing. I stood up. I'm not here because I'm inconsistent. I'm here because I'm inconvenient. Then I walked out. When I told Malik, he just nodded. They're trying to erase your license without touching it. That night, I made a decision. I sent the full proof of care dossier to Laura, all 164 pages. She sent it to a contact she had at the Journal of Clinical Ethics. No promises, but interest. Real interest. Meanwhile, the floor buzzed. Word got out. Younger nurses, the ones raised on systems, started asking questions. What if the screen says one thing and your gut says another? I told them the truth. Then you listen to your gut, because the screen doesn't hold the patient's hand when they cry. Then, the call came from a patient's daughter. She worked in digital compliance at a health tech firm, had been quietly following our audit trail through the hospital's public reports. My mother said you caught something the system didn't, she said. I try, I told her. Well, now I'm trying too. I know the back end. I know how this software was trained. Pause. And I know what they buried to get it cleared for rollout. I leaned forward. Tell me everything. Her name was Natalie Greer. She worked in risk architecture for a medical tech compliance board, and she was scared. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said, voice low, even over the phone. But the approval package for VitalBridge was padded. The test data was filtered to remove outliers, human overrides that outperformed the system. They called them noise, meaning nurses who caught errors. Exactly. They buried every case where human intervention was better, called it statistical drift. That's why the system always insists it's right. It was trained to ignore anything that contradicts itself. She paused. Your shadow notes? It's the only full record we've ever seen of live floor discrepancies. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the pea slowly from Mrs. Lynn blooming quietly in the window. I opened the binder, flipped through the pages. Names, stories, patients who'd been more than data points. The next morning, I gave the binder to Laura. 2 days later, she handed it to a reporter. By the weekend, it was on the front page of 3 national outlets. Leaked hospital records show AI system replacing nurses missed hundreds of critical errors. Nurse-led audit sparks national inquiry into health tech oversight. The human gut versus the algorithm, a silent battle at the bedside. The hospital released a statement. We are pausing our integration with VitalBridge pending further review. She resigned 2 days later. And me? I wasn't fired. They couldn't. Not now. Instead, I got an offer from the State Board of Nursing. They wanted me to lead a task force on ethical tech adoption. They offered a seat, a voice, not a promotion, a purpose that I accepted. My first proposal was simple. Every new clinical system must include mandatory override documentation, human redundancy, and direct nurse input in all development phases. We called it the Care Clause. They voted it through, unanimously. A month later, I walked back into my old unit, not as a nurse, as a teacher. The same young nurse who once whispered, "What if the screen says one thing and your gut says another?" She was now precepting a new hire. And when I passed her in the hallway, she said, "I remember what you told me." Which part? That care starts before the chart, and it doesn't end when the system says it should. I smiled, because this was never about winning. It was about remembering that behind every beep, every screen, every clinical code, there is a human, and some things you can't program.